a program to fund or a policy to implement. You're in the early phases of this intervention and you start with the theory of change and you pilot it on a group of people, users, beneficiaries, and you have developed a logical framework, you have collected data on your outcomes, a set of indicators that are important to you to know whether you are having the desired impact or not. And when I use the word impact, basically what I'm going to share with you is the title of this sharing is called Impact Evaluations 101. When I use the word impact, it could either mean positive or negative, not just positive. So now you are coming to me, getting my expert opinion, and I'm being sarcastic. If your program had the desired impact, and if I was a Vijayaragavan I was 4 years back, I would say that I would give you this advice. Get the data before the program, get the data, outcome data after the program, find the difference, and bam, you have your impact. And if you were to ask the Vijayaragavan 2 years back, I would correct myself and say, no, you don't do that. You have another group which did not have their intervention, get the before after data for that, call that a comparison group, and group that had the intervention, call that an intervention group. Find the difference for both of them and get this whole big difference, and that is your impact. So this is an example that you see here. You see that one group, so you have a program group, you have a comparison group. Before the intervention, the difference is 5 points. After the intervention, it's 12 points. So you can say that the impact is 12 minus 5, which is 7 points. Now, there is something problematic here. If I were teaching in a grad course, I would probably ask you questions, but I'm going to tell you what that is. Before I tell you what that is, some key terms. We are talking about causal inference. What we want to do is to find a causal relationship between the intervention and your outcome. You want to say for sure with a certain confidence level that because of the intervention you had this outcome, and that is not because of something else. And the other two key terms are internal validity and external validity. You can just get the concept of this. When I say that my evaluation is internally valid, when I say evaluation, what I mean is the impact that I'm trying to find in my study. When I say that it is internally valid, I can say for sure that the intervention is what caused that outcome. And when I say it's externally valid, what I mean is I can generalize the results that I'm getting here to a larger population. So one is within the small sample, whatever that I'm establishing this dependence, and the external validity is about generalizing it. So why my result earlier may not be valid is what I have learned over the last 2 years at some point. So it could be internally invalid for a number of reasons, one being maturation. So I start my intervention, say, at the 1st grade, and I get the outcome data in the 5th grade. Now, anyway, the students would have grown over these 4 years, from 1st grade to 5th grade, or 5 years. And so their cognitive abilities would have developed over this time, and therefore I cannot completely attribute the outcome to my intervention because they're anyway going to go through this development and history. Now I have two groups that I'm trying to compare. One group has an intervention and the other group is a comparison group. And this intervention group, it is possible that they might have had some kind of some other programs being implemented. Like some schools might also have an arts program by, say, another foundation like Becoming I Foundation and Teach for India schools. So they might be in a completely different trajectory. And it will be not accurate for me to compare the results of that group with a group that did not have any of those. And selection bias. So some groups might enroll for certain programs. Like for example, when I was teaching in my school, the school next in the next street to my school, once the HM from that school visited my school and they saw Teach for India, and so they wanted to get in touch, and they now have a fellow in their school. So they started with a certain motivation, right? Like there are some schools that want to have Teach for India, and so they start with a certain motivation, and it will be unfair on my part to compare those schools with schools that did not self-enroll. So there is a selection, this group is selecting itself, and I cannot compare the outcomes from that group with groups that did not do not have Teach for India because they did not enroll in it. And there are many more, but these three are some key reasons why our study would not be internally valid. And external validity is threatened when your sample, like you're running your pilot on a sample of a larger population, when your sample does not exactly represent the larger population. So if I am to run a study in Thiruvanmiyur, I cannot generalize that to students in Tiruvattriyur. So it's like that, because they're completely different groups of people, and I can't just generalize it to larger part of Thiruvanmiyur if I do a study in 1 or 2 schools in Thiruvanmiyur. So how do you find a valid causal relationship? Quickly, another key term, counterfactual. A counterfactual is nothing but what would have happened to a group that had the intervention if not for the intervention. Now, if there is a school that I'm giving a curriculum, what would have happened to that same set of students or the people in that sample if I did not give the curriculum? So that will be called as a counterfactual. In an ideal world, a counterfactual would be a clone of the treatment group. And the difference being the counterfactual does not have the treatment. And so when I get the outcome from both of these groups, I can just simply find a simple difference between the two to say that my intervention had such an impact. But because it is not possible in an ideal world, we try to assemble a counterfactual that closely mirrors our treatment group. That is what the science of art and science of impact evaluation is all about. So how we achieve that is randomized evaluations, which is the heart of whatever I'm sharing here. The idea of randomization or randomized control trials is this. You define a large population, or as in like the population that is of interest to you. This could be third graders or transgenders in Tamil Nadu or whatever, and you randomly select a limited number. You randomly select a sample from this population, and then you again have another layer of randomization to divide this selected individuals into 2 groups, one being the intervention group or the treatment group and the other being the control group. So these 2 groups are now counterfactuals of each other because they are randomly selected from within the population. And so if you were to swap the treatment, you should still get the same or similar results. You would be able to establish the same kind of causal relationship between your intervention and the outcomes. So that is about. So at the end you have the outcome, and when you take the simple difference between what you see for your intervention and control, that will be your impact because of the program. And the advantage of this is that it helps negate or preempt all the biases that would otherwise creep into your evaluation. Like when you do a simple difference in the outcomes, or when you have 2 different groups and without controlling for all these biases, if you just compare the differences, that will not be valid. So randomization helps you negate all of that. So key ideas: impact evaluation helps you tease out the causal relationship. Counterfactual is what would have happened to the treatment group if not given the treatment. Randomization helps you make causal inferences by preempting the biases. And evaluation design, which I did not touch upon here, it is all about how you sample, what is the size of the sample, how many stages are there. All of that is critical to improve this attribution or the internal validity and generalizability or the external validity. And organizations that do impact evaluations, if you're interested to learn more, are JPAL, ID Insight, World Bank, etc. And yeah, that's it about me. I'm a 14er. I taught primary grades at CPS Thiruvenkatasamy Street. Before that, I was an assistant professor at Vellore Institute of Technology. After that, I graduated from International Education Policy, not Public Policy, from Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I taught at the GSE for